Alrighty, mighty. Let's get on to the last conversation for today. There are two very short clips, and there's one that's a bit longer, because we're going to be having a look at the Marine and Coastal Area Amendment Act, which this government is basically shitting all over. Well, they're shitting over the previous with their new legislation. But they had a quick chat about Jim Bolger, and it's very quick. It's only 40 seconds, but I wanted you to hear... Oh, they've still got something playing. Where is that? Chewie, there it is there. I can see it. Bump. They were... There we go. Back again. There was just a very quick bit about Jim Bolger. The Bish said I didn't really know him very well. And I wanted to play this bit from Kieran because Kieran talks about some of the things that Bolger did. And when you hear him say them, you realise, oh, when you talk about today's national, this is not your grandfather's national party. This is not your father's national party.
Yeah, I was really sorry to see this news when I woke up this morning. I've always had a lot of time for Jim Bolger, and obviously our thoughts are with Jane and the family. It's sad news because, of course, he was the reason why we now have treaty settlements, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that is something that other countries look at and think, I wish we could do that for our Indigenous population. It is something that we can be proud of as a country, and Jim needs to be recognised for his role in that.
So compared to what these guys are doing at the moment, Jim Bolger is remembered as a man who helped the Indigenous people of this country get redress, at least seek redress for being wronged and have lands taken off them. And remember, there's always a debate to be had around lands. There are sort of two or maybe three kinds. There's the land that was stolen in the 1800s. Mm-hmm. There was the land that was purchased, but perhaps Māori at the time were taken advantage of, so for an unfair price. And then there was the land, especially around World War II, that the government used as because of defending the country, on the understanding it was going to be returned to Māori, and it never was. And the best example of that's always Raglan Golf Course. It was Māori land that was taken by the government.
Bastion Point.
Bastion Point.
Well. But there's another one of those.
But that was an agreement between the government and Māori where they said, yeah, sure, I understand national security, yada, yada, yada. And then they just never gave it back. Even if that option two, which is land that was purchased, maybe in an unfair way, even if you remove that and just go the other two, which were stolen, not returned, there's plenty enough there that a government needs to redress wrongs of the past that governments have done. So that's how I always think about the conversation around lands and redress for lands. And thanks to Jim Bolger, that's happened. Could you imagine anyone saying thanks to David Seymour, or thanks to Winston Peters, or thanks to Christopher Luxon, all these things that this people group have suffered at the hands of a government has now been redressed. I mean, they had the apology for the state care thing, and we find out that people in state care are maybe not getting tortured and electrocuted, but are still being pretty badly abused and physical abuse. I'm talking about pretty badly treated. Like they say, oh, we're sorry about that, and then not the same practices continue on, but some pretty shoddy practices seem to continue. And remember, this government's going to be remembered for their support with and of big tobacco, big oil, and also for squashing everything Māori. That's who this government is. National 2026. Yeah, okay, Chewie, I'll just play the next bit, then I'll shut up, because this is about the Marine and Coastal Area Amendment Act. This is a good 4 minutes long. Actually, there's a point that I might cut out, like at 3 minutes, but we'll have a look at what they're talking about, because you can see the Bish is very concerned. You can just tell that by his face as you look at it right now. But that's what he's
probably waiting for someone else to come along.
And they're talking about the submission process of Select Committee and how 98% were against what this government was going to do, and this government's going to still do it. And we're just thinking treaty principles all over again, regulatory standards all over again.
Well, it's complicated, but the short story is this. Parliament passed the Marine and Coastal Act in 2015, which is designed to recognise legitimate customary rights and customary title claims in the marine and coastal space. That all followed the foreshore and seabed issues from 2003 and 4, which people will be, I think, will remember, at least the debates over it. And since that time, the Court of Appeal has essentially changed the test that's in the law, in the 2015 law, and expanded it in a way that...
So what they're saying is the courts have decided in a way now that we disagree with. Because we disagree with the courts, we're going to change it to make the courts act in the way that we think they should be. This is literally a government putting its thumb on the scale of justice. This, on some level, is Trumpian, hiring or getting in his supporters to do his will. The courts are saying this, the government doesn't like it, the courts are going to be changed via legislation. They're going to change what they can do. Remember, the courts don't make the legislation, they interpret the legislation. So if they're interpreting the legislation in a way that this government doesn't like, we'll just change the legislation and then they'll have to interpret it a different way. It is actually the opposite of democracy, is what it is.
Certainly the government thinks was not intended by the 2015 legislation. So what Parliament's...
They think. They're saying that they're interpreting 2015 wrong. Government's saying that. The courts are doing it wrong. So we're going to change it so they do it right, i.e. the outcome we want.
Doing at the moment, or through a government bill, is reversing those Court of Appeal decisions and going back to the test that was put in place in 2015 with by the way, a law designed by the National Party and the Maori Party, who were in coalition with us at the time. Very different Maori Party now, obviously, but that was the case at the time.
Kieran, what's the biggest risk if this bill is passed in its current form?
Before he answers, just look at that chyron down the bottom. 99% of submissions opposed this bill. Now, there is a case to answer that we don't legislate from mob rule, right? There's a case to answer for that. If we had a legislative process, or if we had a select committee, do you want to pay 20% less tax? That might get 99% wanting to support it. That wouldn't be the best decision. So I acknowledge that we don't legislate because of mob rule. But when this government's getting, it seems, every bit of feedback through select committee about every legislation they're trying to change or introduce that harms Māori, being 95% and above in favour of Māori, I would be questioning myself. I don't think it would be valid to then go, we don't rule by mob rule. We don't change laws by mob rule. You're like, well, but this is like everyone's against this. All the academics, all the experts, all the tribunals, all the people who have done this for 20 years as their profession, they're all against it. So what you're saying is every expert in New Zealand, every historian in New Zealand, everyone who knows this like the back of their hand are saying no, and you fellas are saying yes, and that's it. It's pretty scary to think about it like that. All right, we'll keep going.
Well, there's two risks, I think. One is the accumulative effect of other legislation that has come before it under this government that certainly creates the perception, but in many people's eyes, the reality that the treaty is being undermined and the rights that were signed up to in 1840 are being undermined. At the end of the day, the courts do have a role in this country to interpret legislation, and they have done so accordingly. The government has decided to legislate to change that. Many are of the view that that actually moves away from the intent of the legislation and changes things. That is a debatable point, obviously, but many people, including former National Party people, are opposed to this move. And if you look at the other things like the Treaty Principles Bill and the Māori wards, etc., there is a cumulative effect under this government that many people are starting to get quite impacted by in terms of the undermining of the treaty and people's rights that come under that for Māori. So, yeah, there's a lot of concern out there at the moment.
And that cumulative effect, I mean, like we did it earlier, and I'm not saying this is a complete list: treaty principles, regulatory standards, Māori wards, Māori Health Authority, English first government departments, road signs, taking away the funding. Like there was I don't remember the way it was worded, but a funding, if you spoke to our Māori and you worked in government, that was like in schools they have like it's called a management unit, and you can get another few $1,000s a year to look after a department. Like being fluent in today gave you an opportunity for more funding for your job, more money in government. That's gone. Chewie, you were saying today in schools. I think this is a really, really important word for us to remember that Kieran's just said, which is the cumulative effect of what this government's doing. I'll only play one more bit, Chewie, because Bish has asked about the 99%, and we'll come out after that.
Yeah, 98.7% of the submissions were against it. That included bipartisan groups, but also iwi and lawyers. I mean, I guess I come back to you again, Chris. What's the point of a submissions process if the government says we're going to push it through anyway?
Well, it's to hear from what people think, and it's obviously to improve the law, but it's not a poll. You don't, there are lots of submissions to select committees. It's not just a raw numbers game. You've got to do the right thing, and we stand by what we're doing. It goes back to the 2015 law, which was designed to encapsulate the finding of the Court of Appeal back in 2003 in the Ngāti Apa decision around legitimate claims. It's actually partly not related to the treaty. It's actually a customary title common law process by which upon settlement of New Zealand, this is really technical and people probably tuning out, but upon settlement, Maori continued to have their common law rights to property, and the Marine and Coastal Act deals with that in the marine and coastal space and make sure there's a legitimate pathway to recognise those rights as well as recognising other rights in that space.
Yeah. So we'll leave that there for now. I did have one other little piece about Chris Bishop being the next Prime Minister, but Chewie, obviously I've talked all the way through that, but the floor is yours, sir.
Oh, there's so much there, Pat. Jesus, I've got to play catch up. I want to talk about Jim Bolger. Jim Bolger is really interesting because and the usual thing that's happening is the eulogizing of someone that has passed, and that's fair enough and understandable. As mentioned here, he did some good. Like there was it's almost a seismic shift in how the government treated Māori at that point, and that's worthy of note. Also, we have talked about his government of the early 90s with Ruth Richardson as finance minister.
Yep, mother of all.
One of the most vicious, sharp-edged, grinding governments for the poor that we have ever seen. Changed things in this country for the worse, and we are still dealing with the consequences of decisions and attitudes installed with the government that he led. So you can eulogize him. He did good stuff, but he's also responsible for some bad stuff. And then he did that classic thing that we've spoken about that seems to be almost strictly the purview of people from the National Party, is that when they get out of politics, they kind of have a realization.
Yeah.
And his big one was, this neoliberalism thing that we did sounds like a crock of shit and it's bad. And that differs very, very starkly from his former finance minister, Ruth Richardson, which is like, it's great, we should do more, people should be in more pain, I enjoy it.
I have something to add. May I please,
Yes.
sir? Trickle-down economics. You're talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Before it was called trickle-down economics, do you know what it was called?
Get the fuck away, get off my land? I don't know. Ooh, yuck, poor people.
If you don't know this, and look, that sounds arrogant. I only learned this a few weeks ago. Before it was called trickle-down economics, it was called horse and sparrow economics. Horse and sparrow economics is literally the horse eats the oats, and they have enough that some of the oats pass through their body in their shit, and the sparrows get to eat the oats out of the horse's shit. which is not quite as an attractive way of thinking about things as trickle-down economics. However, how fucking accurate is that? You poor people can eat the leftovers out of our shit. Now, obviously, the analogy is the food, but now we'll talk about the finances, the money, the households, the people in the chat saying, thanks, Pat. I'm just telling you what it is. I actually think when I learned this, it's one of these things I went, oh, fuck, I wish I knew this 5 years ago. Because it's a better example for a neo-lib than trickle-down economics. People saying, what leftovers? It's very true. This is the point. This is the point with the horse and sparrow, is the horse has to gorge itself with so many oats that some pass through undigested. So trickle-down economics, the ones at the top have to get so much money, so much income, that it's literally falling out of their pockets for the poor people at the bottom to pick up. This is trickle-down economics. And for Jim Bolger to be like, neoliberalism's not quite the thing. Yeah. I think that horse and sparrow should be used in every left-wing economic debate for the end of time. The neoliberal plan was for the poor to eat the leftovers of the rich's shit. Was for the poor to take the pennies falling out of the pockets of the rich whilst they were stuffing them with $100 bills.
I think the other thing is, because there's been a lot of people that have been reflecting on Jim Bolger's sort of reflections on his time and neoliberalism. There's a danger there going, oh, so he became a good guy at the end. No, he became a complicated guy. They're all complicated. They're neither good nor bad. I did notice the press had an article about that sort of went, is he New Zealand's best prime minister? Buried towards the bottom of this article. Yeah, I know. Terrible. Buried towards the bottom of this article, it goes, but he was a gnat to his fingertips on his huge dairy farmer's hands. When I saw him in August, he pronounced with all the certainty that he's generally pronounced any of his thoughts that Jacinda Ardern was the worst prime minister the country had had in his lifetime.
Jesus.
So, look, people aren't perfect. They're not always right. He's right about the neoliberalism stuff. He was wrong about his government at the time. I think he's personally woefully wrong on that. Just like, that's an indefensible comment by an old man at the end of his life.
Yeah. I saw him on TV in the last year or so, and I just thought, gosh, age is a horrible thing. What it does to us all. Yikes. Wasn't looking that well.
But yeah, he clearly didn't like John Key.
Yeah.
He clearly doesn't even recognise the National Party as it stands at the moment. And all of these guys in the Nats that are eulogising as well should reflect on that.
Yeah.
Are you recognisable to the person that you're holding up as this former champion of yours? Like, even Bish talking about him was a little bit dismissive, wasn't he? Oh, I didn't know very much about him.
He told a story about Bish was doing a public meeting, and Bolger came along to it, and very quickly it turned into a public meeting of Bolger telling stories about his. It was nice. It was a nice story he told, but he obviously didn't know anything about him at all. And for a lot of people, it's so weird, Chewie, that when you're of a certain age, you realize how when you were a kid, yesterday was 30 years ago. Like, I grew up in New Zealand, my kind of formative years in the 90s, and that feels like forever ago that the 90s was back to World War II. That was like 35 years before that. So the equivalent of me growing up in the 90s to World War II was like growing up now at that it is to 1990. It's the same time span. And 1990 feels like it was fucking yesterday. But when I was a kid, World War II felt like it was 200 years ago. So, yeah. Anyway. Hey, how are you, team? Hopefully you guys won't freak out too much about that horse and sparrow thing. But I think it's actually a brilliant little factoid to know and to be able to go, and it's a perfect analogy of trickle-down economics. You know, because remember, if the horse eats the right amount of food, then it digests it all. And there's nothing. So the horse has to gorge itself on more than it needs. If the person, now trickle down, if the person at the top has, you know, just enough, the right amount of money, then none's falling out of their pockets. But if they stuff into their pocket $100 bills and they then come to overflowing because they have more than they need, then the poor get to taste a little bit. Only when they've got more than they need, not when they've got enough.
I feel like we've spent 40 minutes on the digestion of horses. Are we pivoting into animal husbandry?
I just think I need to go to the bathroom. That's probably where it came from. Hey, just while you're here, 710 people watching live. 710 people watching live.
Pull out your phones.
If you haven't noticed, there's a QR code up here. We got
the QR code.
We got the bronze listener award 2 years ago. We got the silver listener award last year. We want to get the gold one this year. I don't often talk about this, but the thing that's fun about the listener awards is you can actually somewhat manipulate it, I think. That'll take you to New Zealand nzpodcastawards.com/vote. Vote for us. Go on. I triple dare you. Go and vote for us. And then get a friend to vote for us too. Go put it on your Facebook page to all your friends. Why don't you go? And these are the details you need. Big Hairy News. Great.
Put it in Facebook neighborhood groups.
Well, let me just say
discussion.
Let me say one other thing. Ro here, who says already done. I'm sure you've got a second email address, Ro. Just saying.
That's not ethical.
Oh,
do
shit.
it though.
BSA.
Do it.
BSA complaint.
Go
Pat
ahead.
Brittenden trying to rig the system. Unethical. Yeah, me and those doctors. I'll happily be as unethical as the senior doctors. Right? I'll take that title. Oh, kia ora whānau. Have a small favour to ask you. On the bottom of the screen right now, there is a QR code. If you click on that QR code, it takes you to the New Zealand Podcast Awards, the nomination page for listener choice. If you would be so kind as to head to the listener choice page and perhaps think about nominating Big Hairy News for the Listener Choice Award. It's a great way you can support us. It's a great way that we can continue to get our name out there. And if you enjoy the content that we provide for you, maybe you would consider heading to nzpodcastawards.com/nominate or click on the QR code to nominate Big Hairy News. Thank you.